guys, it's Sam, and this is my February wrap-up. I read 5 books in February. The month flew by. I know it's a short month, but only by 2 days. We say this like every time, and I just had a really busy February, so I didn't have a lot of time to read, but I still got a number of things read, which is an accomplishment, I would say. And I do have longer reviews for basically all of these books, either currently up or upcoming. So if you want more in-depth thoughts, check those out. The first book I finished in February was If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. This is an adult standalone dark academia story that's a bit of a mystery. It follows forget exactly how many of them there are, but it follows a very small cohort of Shakespearean actor students in this very niche liberal arts school during their senior year when tragedy strikes and something happens and one of them gets sent to prison, and we know that at the very beginning, and we don't know why and like what happened exactly and who did it and whatever. So we get to see the buildup of everything as everything kind of comes to its culmination and the big bad thing happens, and then them reeling from it and like the aftermath of all of it. This is super dark. So there's triggers in here for death, drowning, drug abuse, drug overdose, suicide, physical abuse, and emotional abuse, as well as cheating and eating disorders. So yeah, a lot of heavy content, but I found this to be really atmospheric in the way that I want a dark academia to be, and I was interested in the mystery and what was going on and these characters. You have the strengths of these characters who are sort of fighting against if they are their tropes. So a lot of them have been cast over these last 4 years as like a various archetype, a various trope, and it's kind of this idea of like, is that who they are? Is that who they've been casted to be? Can they break that mold? What do they mean to each other? How they've like toxically gotten codependent with each other? All of this stuff that then culminates in this big disaster. The writing definitely works for this setting as well. I found the setting to be just like so easy to imagine, and these characters so easy to imagine. And even the way these characters are with each other, they're so pretentious. Like they're talking to each other in Shakespeare lines, but like that's what these kinds of people would do, right? So I found this not to be overwritten in a pretentious way as say like how I felt the Atlas 6 was. This was like just enough. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It wasn't perfect. It has a vague ending, so just know that. I like a vague ending, and I think for this it really works, but it has a more vague ending, and there were elements of it that weren't perfect that I talk about more in my review and discussion of this book, but overall, really enjoyed it. 4 out of 5 stars. And then I listened to Sorrowland by River Solomon. This is another darker book. This follows a teenage girl who runs away from this cult commune where she is pregnant, and she ends up having twins in the woods, and something starts happening to her, and she doesn't know if it's supernatural, she doesn't know if it's like physical, and we follow this like sort of slice of life in a weird way of her time spent after escaping this cult and everything kind of from there as she tries to like survive and figure out what this thing is and all of that. This one's also heavy. It has triggers for body horror, sexism, torture, death of children, some like self-harm type elements, and just religious institutionalism and like cults and all the things that come with that. Just like indoctrination type stuff, sexism, just like some really gross like pedophilia type stuff, like a lot of stuff that you would find in those settings. This is present here. I found the narration of this to be excellent. The narrator that narrates this audiobook has narrated a couple other books that I have read as well. And this was much more of a, again, this like, River Solomon does this interesting slice of lifey thing. I found it very similar to is it The Deep? Their other book about the mermaids. They do this thing with structural sort of like racism and things while also pointing out like individual ramifications, and like very theme heavy books without necessarily a ton going on. There's definitely this like suspense element here and this like unease happening. I never quite know how to classify like their books, because this book is kind of like, it's not quite sci-fi, but it's not quite not sci-fi, and it's but it feels, and it's written more of in like a contemporary lit fic type way, but very heavy hitting and like not holding back at all in the writing style and like what it's talking about. And yeah, it's just very like this moment in time in these characters' lives, and it's not necessarily something that gets like resolved in a pretty bow at the end. Another very sort of like inconclusive ending with this one as well. I wouldn't necessarily even say the character is likable. Like it's definitely, I find their books slightly harder to read in that way, but not in a way that makes me want to put them down. Just in they like, okay, these are people who have like super rough edges because of everything they've been through, and therefore it's not like a traditional journey that they're necessarily on. There's sapphic representation in here. There's some pretty heavy explicit sex scenes, just know that. It's not erotica or anything, but like when the sex scenes happen, they are very, again, like more blunt in your face and things. So this was an interesting like theme exploration, but because it's not necessarily, it's not supposed to be fun, but like because it's not necessarily an enjoyable experience, it's hard to rate a little higher for me on my like spectrum. But I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoy what River Solomon does, and I will continue to read their stuff. I don't know if they'll ever be an author that I like have a 5-star book out of, but I'm also like don't need that to keep reading and enjoying their work. So yeah, if you're into body horror stuff, if you're into weird nature shit, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to read this book, you'll probably enjoy this on some level. Next, I read The Final Strife by Sarah Al-Arifi, and this is another heavy book. I've done a full spoiler-free review for this that I will link on the screen because there's a lot of details to this like synopsis and things, but basically this is a world where people are broken into castes based on the color of their blood. So everyone in here is black, but like they have different colored blood, and so that's how sort of the racism, without it being a racism thing, because it's not the color of their skin, it's the color of their blood, that's how that exists. There's a lot of like themes of colonization and things, and we're primarily following 2 main characters. One is a girl who was switched at birth with one of the higher like blood colors and has been trained her whole life to essentially take over like from within essentially, and then she crosses paths with the girl that she was switched with, and they're like in their early 20s at this point, so they're fully adult, and then everything kind of goes from there. But there's a lot of heavy themes in here, and there's like so much more to it than just that, but for the sake of a wrap up I want to be brief. But listen to my full review, which I will link on the screen, if you want more in depth than just that, because there's way more. But there are triggers in here for drug use and abuse, torture, mutilation, racism, and like colonization themes. I read a lot of dark shit this month. I didn't even realize that until I was doing this review. This had a slower start for me because at the very beginning we're following one of the characters who is a heavy drug user and is really like insufferable in what she's going through because of her addiction, and like because of the just really like polarizing nature of her, and she's not supposed to be likable. But the journey that she eventually goes on, and that both the characters really go on, is like a really good, solid character development arc. And so that was really interesting in the way that we have these like different political systems and different things. This is a solid foundation to a series. There were definitely some things that were sort of like dropped in that I'm like, okay, I will give you some time to flesh that out. This is gonna be a trilogy. So like, I'm okay with that. I'm intrigued about this combination of like political machinations stuff with a bunch of different power players, and then this like bigger thing going on in the background. I love when like a big fantasy series will do that, where it's like you have this big thing, but we're all focused on this, but like the big thing, you know? And just like the way that the different characters are having like various things explored through them and whatever. I mean, that's what books do. There's also a sapphic relationship in here that I highly enjoy, and like this world, although it is like really oppressive in a lot of ways, what it's not oppressive in is it's not a like gender oppressive society. So there are trans characters, there are non-binary characters, there's words for them that are not malicious, and like it's a normal thing. So that was cool within the setting of a very like oppressive world. It wasn't oppressive in every single way. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the rest of this. The next book comes out, I think in like April or May of this year. And yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing with this. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, even though it was a slow start, a very solid conclusion, and looking forward to the rest of the series. My nonfiction for this month, not that I'm reading a nonfiction every month, but I just so happen to be lately, is The Smart Girl's Guide to Polyamory by Dedeker Winston. I read this book because I've been reading a lot of books on like polyamory, non-monogamy, non-traditional relationship structures for a number of reasons, work, personal, everything. But also one of my favorite podcasts is Multi-Amory, which is a podcast about any kind of relationship. Like it's just about like relationship tools and things. It's really good. And Dedeker is one of the 3 hosts of that podcast, and I really like her style. So I read this and I really like this. I read The Ethical Slut last month and talked about that being kind of like, okay, like it's a little shallow, like it's going in a direction I don't really like necessarily. This had more concrete things to like dive into, more things to like process. I felt like it was more helpful for a lot of the issues that come up within like non-traditional relationship structures, and also just had a lot of good information for like any relationship structure and like communication and stuff. What I really like about all these books and why I can continue to read them mainly is because there are so many good communication tools for any relationship, whether you're in a non-monogamous, monogamous, platonic, like anything. That is what like this community in particular like really pushes. So I really dig that. I really enjoyed this. It wasn't perfect, but I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. And this podcast is actually coming out with a book soon, I think in like the next 3 months or so, maybe over the summer, that is called Multi-Amory, and it's like a bunch of their tools they talk about on the podcast for communication, like purely, like again, it's not about non-monogamy, it's just about communication. I'm really looking forward to that because I really liked her writing style here, and I think she's probably gonna be like the main writer of that one. So yeah, so far, really like her work, and this is my favorite, well, one of my top 2 of these sort of like non-monogamy books that I've read. This one and Polysecure are my 2 favorites. And then to wrap up the month, I read Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is very well loved, so many of you probably already know about it. This is a adult standalone, although there's gonna be a companion sort of like prequel. I don't know if he's gonna continue to write in this world, but like technically this can be read as a standalone. And it's a cozy fantasy book. This was our Household Book Club pick for this month, so I will link our discussion on the screen for this. I will also probably be doing like a spoiler-free review for this as well, coming up soon. But this follows our main character, Aviv, who is a orc that was previously like a adventurer, sword for hire kind of person, but recently she got a kind of a dream to start a coffee shop in this world. So she ends up following that dream, and this is like her journey with that, and like sort of found family, although we did talk about in the live show how it's kind of more like found coworkers because that's not super fleshed out necessarily, but it's kind of if you take a little bit of that found family, found coworkers, cozy coffee shop life sim and combine it. Low stakes, semi-predictable in a lot of ways, but very sort of atmospheric, cute. All the characters are very cute, and just like cozy and chill and like wonderful. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. It did what it set out to do. When books are a certain genre, especially something like cozy, I do hold them to a less high standard. Some people get really sort of like annoyed by that they're like, oh, they should still do X, Y, Z. This, just like I don't compare an epic fantasy book to a romance novel, same thing within subgenres. Like, I'm not going to compare a political fantasy to this. That's not what this is trying to do. So I thought that this was pretty well done for what it was trying to do. Gave it like a 4 stars. I think I've solidly landed on like 3.75 to 4 stars. Really enjoy it. I will likely at some point read the prequel that's coming out. These are a nice little brain break, and I appreciate them for what they are. So that is it for the books that I read in February. Comment below, let me know what books you read last month. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all you guys soon. Bye.